This is Joey. Welcome to episode 1 of Combat 24/7, where we talk about MMA, news, and combat sports alike. I'm pleasured to be joined today with Creighton Bauman. He's been wrestling all his life, and he's now a collegiate wrestler. How are you doing?
Hello. Not too bad.
We have a lot to talk about here. UFC 249 is coming up. I got to say that I wasn't too confident that after it got canceled April 18th that we'd be back on track this soon.
I know the biggest thing is I love that it's going to be the only, selfishly as an MMA fan, I love that it's going to be the only sporting event on TV, and then especially a card where it's just top to bottom. Going to be some exciting fights. I think that's going to be perfect, and it's going to draw a lot of eyes. So that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, in the card, let's be honest, okay? The UFC could have put on a rinky-dink card and still gotten tons of traction just because there's nothing else going on. But the card they put on, very nice.
Yeah, for sure. Literally every single fight is like bananas. I was a little worried too because I thought, maybe with traveling they might just have to pull whoever they can. But, they really knocked it out of the park.
We'll get through our predictions on every single fight of the card, Creighton, but first I just want to point out a couple of crazy fights on the card. All week they've been mentioning Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje. What kind of fight is this? What kind of fight is this as a longtime fan?
Like I said, I can't think of any two people better to introduce the sport to, just the common folk watching ESPN. These dudes Tony, if anyone who's ever seen Tony, he's bonkers. He thrives off of everything, just his movement, his everything he throws. It's so unorthodox, but it's so effective, and it's tiring to watch. And that's one of the things that kind of worries me about Gaethje, because he himself said I believe he said he's got about 16 minutes of hell in him, which I agree. I think personally anything after the second round, it's I really struggle to see Justin carrying over that power, because Tony's just in your face the whole time. But those first two rounds with Justin's measured approach, it takes one shot with just anybody.
Oh, and there's no crowd. How crazy is that? Imagine the crowd in that building when that goes on. Another fight I wanted to talk about, and I could just list off every fight as a good fight, but I want to highlight a couple. Obviously, the co-main event, Henry Cejudo and Dominic Cruz. But talk about Francis Ngannou versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I think
somebody might die.
Somebody
might.
Yeah. What a fight. And then skipping. This is how good the card is. I'm skipping over Jeremy Stevens and Calvin Kattar. We're talking about Anthony Pettis and Donald Cerrone. Without getting too deep into it, because we'll go over it. How bad does Donald Cowboy Cerrone kind of need this win in his career, or does he not really need it? Is it just a fighter that people are always going to watch, win or lose?
Yeah, and you could kind of say the same thing for Pettis, because they've both, they've main evented how many events. They've fought for titles. Pettis held the title. They've both definitely struggled recently, so it's just kind of interesting to see who's going to be ready to go, because I really think it's whoever shows up is going to get their hand raised in that one.
And what a fight that is. So, just because I want to talk about it so bad, let's just go ahead and get into the card. We'll start at the bottom. Ryan Spann versus Sam Alvey. Just personally, Creighton knows a lot more about UFC than me, but I'll spit off and then let the knowledgeable one talk. Ryan Spann, the fights I have seen against him, knockout of Big Nog. Recently he's looked really good. From the fights I've seen, Sam Alvey, he's always been a good fighter, but when he's faced against top level competition, he falls. So who do you have, and how do you see this fight kind of playing out?
Yeah, Sam Alvey's definitely always one of those noticeable names, but he's never been to the point where you see him on the main card or headlining any events. I personally see Spann finishing him. Like I said, Sam Alvey, he's been around. He's a vet. He's fought with some tough guys, but he's never really been a top tier fighter. And I give this one to Spann for sure.
Yeah, no, I have to agree here, and he's listed as a negative 450 favorite. I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Moving on. Wow, what a fight to have the second fight of the card, Creighton. Bryce Mitchell, Charles Rosa. You want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, dude, that one's awesome. Charles Rosa actually, his last fight, I remember man, I was really counting him out. I'm not gonna lie, and I think he was fighting. I want to say Dennis Bermuda.
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe so. Yep.
Yeah, and man, he looked good. He really did. But Mitchell's another one. He that dude's crazy. I don't think you can not like him. That's gonna be a good one for sure. And I think they're both pretty high level grapplers, so I wouldn't be surprised if that one went to the ground and better man came out on top.
Yeah, Reebok, get Bryce Mitchell his camo shorts now.
Sure.
How do you kind of see that playing out in terms of who do you think gets the upside in that one? I know it's tough. I know
it's tough for sure. And like I said last time, I don't want to say I counted Rosa out, but I definitely had given the advantage to Bermudez, and he ended up surprising me first round finish. So I don't want to go against him again, but I don't know. Maybe it's just the hype of Bryce Mitchell, and I don't know. I just like everything about that guy. I'm gonna give it to Bryce Mitchell on that one.
Yeah, I got to give the favorite to Bryce Mitchell here, not by a lot. I mean, it's going to be a close one. I think it's going to be a very good fight. Bryce Mitchell had a negative 165 favorite. I think that's also pretty fair. And again, the third fight of the card. I'm gonna say this all night, so I mean, you viewers can hate on me. The third fight of the card. Wow, Vicente Luque, Nico Price.
Yeah.
You, if you're comfortable talking, kind of have a little bit of a connection to Nico Price, or kind of a distant connection.
Yeah, I got a chance to just kind of meet him and hang out with him after UFC 228. He ended up losing that night, but he's just a cool dude, and you can tell that he genuinely loves to fight. No surprise that he's stepping up short notice. I mean, like I said, he loves everything about fighting, and I know he lost to Luque before, so I know he's going to be super excited to get this one back. But regardless, both those dudes they're going to put on a show. I mean, there's no way around it. They're both entertainers, both super cool dudes. Like I said, I'm fortunate enough to meet Nico and get to hang out with him. Man, like I said, he genuinely loves fighting, and I can never cheer against someone like that. So I'm going to have to go with Nico on that one. Nico with the upset.
I really wouldn't be surprised. And talk about a step up in competition. If I'm not wrong, 2 fights ago, Vicente Luque beat Mike Perry. Is that correct? And then he stepped up and fought Stephen Wonderboy Thompson.
Yeah.
I mean, Vicente Luque took a huge step in competition. We kind of saw it, but I think Luque and Price are still young in their careers. So I see this fight kind of playing out. Listen, Nico Price, I want to see him win more than anything, but I see Nico Price landing some really good shots against Vicente Luque, but I think Luque has a good chin, and he's fundamentally more sound than Price, and I see Luque winning a very tough, possibly split decision, if not unanimous, over Nico Price. Now, me saying that, I'm no expert. Nico Price could easily knock out or finish him any way possible. Nico Price is such a good striker. You saw him finish Vic with his heel.
Yeah.
You saw him finish, who was it that he finished with his fists while he was on bottom?
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, but I mean, he's a very good fighter, so that's going to be a very good fight to watch. And we're getting into Uriah Hall, Jacare Souza.
Speaking of judges, do you know, I wonder if they're going to have the judges split up at different angles.
I have no clue.
I feel like that could almost be beneficial just because there's already some kind of wacky judging, so maybe being able to see different angles, they'll see different things. I don't know.
Listen, something about judging needs to change. That's all we know. I mean, open scoring, I'm a fan of that. I think a lot of people aren't fans of that, maybe because if someone's up in the scorecards, they might take it slow. But at the same time, if someone's coming for you, you can't take it slow. I'm a fan. How do you feel about open scoring?
I agree. Not to get too off the walls here, but I've always personally been a fan of no rounds. You know, because in my mind, when I think of a fight, I think, you start, you touch gloves, and then it's whoever. Obviously, you do have to have a time limit, but I mean, I think it's whoever finishes someone, or if it's a 10-minute period, 1 10-minute round, I feel like you should be able to tell who won or who was fading, and I don't know. But like I said, that's just my own personal craziness.
Well, I haven't put much thought into that, but I think it would kind of bring out the better fighter if we had, because how many fights have almost been stopped at the last 5 seconds of a round, and I think it would bring out the better fighter, and yeah, they would rise to the top. So that's an interesting take. Thank you, Creighton. Uriah Hall, Jacare Souza. That's a good one.
That's so bonkers. I remember when that got announced for 249 originally, and that was other than Habib and Tony, of course, that was definitely the fight I was looking forward to the most. Just because Uriah Hall is so confusing. He's looked so good and he's so talented, but then it's just that lack of consistency makes it tough. But Jacare is another one who's got all the talent in the world. I mean, you could argue he's probably one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners to ever compete in the octagon, but I don't know. He's kind of came on some tough matches lately, so
Yeah.
I don't know. That really is a tough one.
Jacare Souza had a very close fight against Jan please help me. Jan Blachowicz. Very close fight on that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe before he lost to Jack Hermanson, which
I remember that.
which is another beast, and he lost by submission on that one.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. So he's come off. But he's coming off losses off of top competition. So
yeah. And that's kind of consistently in his career. He's won the matches that he needed to kind of get to the big shot that would maybe get him the title shot, and then just always kind of seems like he'll get right there and then just fall short, which has got to be frustrating for him.
Yeah, and as a I like to call it armchair grappler. As an armchair grappler, obviously Uriah Hall is very impressive, but just personally, I think it was kind of upsetting to see him have such a big rise and then kind of taper off. I mean, he had so much potential. I believe he came out and said it has to do with some kind of mental things that he was dealing with. Maybe, I don't know, fight anxiety. I don't know if that played a factor in it, but wasn't it kind of sad this is one of the rising stars that we thought were going to be a future champion for sure.
Oh yeah, when he was coming off a tough, I remember that he had so many insane knockouts where you just you genuinely felt bad for the dude he was fighting because it just didn't look fair. And then it just kind of, almost every single fight I would go into it thinking oh, this is the one where he pieces it together, and then it's just up from there. But it just never seemed to click for him. But then I don't know. This is definitely, if you beat Jacare, there's no way to downplay that.
And there's nothing against Uriah Hall. He's gone against super top competition. Yeah. He lost the tough final to Kelvin Gastelum, who recently fought for the interim title. He lost to Robert Whitaker. He lost to, everyone loses to Paulo Costa. So
yeah,
no hate against him. I just, I hope he's able to somehow put it together. But as the years go on, it seems a little less convincing. I got to give it to Jacare Souza on that one. I think he gets the job done. I think, personally, every time Uriah Hall goes against really elite competition, I think Jacare Souza fairly still is kind of in that category there. He's very elite. I think Souza's going to get the win. I don't know how. I think Souza can do it anyway. He's good on the feet. He's good on the ground, and he can win a decision. So,
yeah, I would say barring a flashy jumping kick or something crazy from Hall, I would have to say I'd probably go late round submission for Jacare, just because, like I said, his BJJ is so elite. It's you're not gonna find many people who can keep up with him.
Can we go ahead and just change all these fights to 5 rounds?
Exactly.
Please. I think that's what we need right now. Going into the next fight, and keep in mind these are all on prelims, and these could all either be main events or co-main events.
Exactly.
Quite easily. So what a card. Carla Esparza versus Michelle Waterson. You want to go ahead and talk about this for a little bit?
Yeah. I know Michelle Waterson, she kind of impressed me against Joanna. Obviously, it wasn't necessarily a close fight by any means, but I feel like for anyone at 115 to go toe-to-toe with Joanna, that's that's a good accomplishment in itself. Just based off that, I would kind of have to give her the advantage. But Carla Esparza's tough. She's
Former
another one.
champion.
Yeah, I got to see her fight at 228. I don't recall it working out for her, but she's tough as well. So that's going to be a good one.
Very good, yeah. Michelle Waterson, I believe, in that Joanna fight, had her back at one point and almost got a submission. I don't know if it was almost, but, Michelle Waterson is really a good breakout fighter right now. She's seemed to making leaps in her performances, and she's just getting better and better. This is a tough one to call, though. Carla Esparza is a very tough opponent, as Tony would say, a very game opponent. It's tough to call. I got to give the slight favorite to Carla Esparza in this one, but it would be a huge win for Michelle Waterson.
Yeah, I guess just to combat you, I'll take Michelle Waterson on that one.
Okay.
But that's, like you said, that's a tough one. Could definitely go either way.
Yeah, it's nothing I'm going to bet on for sure.
Yeah.
So that's a tough one. Wow, this next fight, Alencio Olenek needs to fire his manager. Alencio Olenek versus Fabricio Verdum. As you guys know, Fabricio Verdum popped for doping violation. I'm not sure exactly what it is.
Years ago.
I think he had a 2-year suspension, something like that. And he's coming back to face Alencio Olenek, who Alencio Olenek, he's good, but when he goes against elite strikers, he falls. He went against Walt Harris, and he went against Alistair Overeem, and both of them finished him in the first round.
Yeah, and his signature Ezekiel choke, as awesome as it is, good luck on Fabricio Verdum, of all people. Fabricio's one a lot of people forget. He's, one of the more decorated heavyweight champs of all time. A lot of people could argue that, you could put him in the, for sure top 3, top 5 heavyweights of all time. And, he's kind of one who he bursted onto the scene with some phenomenal jiu-jitsu and then picked up striking pretty quickly and ended up getting pretty good at striking. I'd have to give him the advantage in striking and on the ground as well, just because I just think his grappling's too high level to get caught in one of those Ezekiel chokes.
You think Fabricio Verdum has better jiu-jitsu than Alencio Olenek?
Yeah.
The most submissions?
No, Fabricio's tough.
Yeah.
His jiu-jitsu is tough, like world class.
Yeah. No, both very game opponents, but I think Fabricio Verdum finishes this, and I think he finishes it within 2 rounds. Alencio Olenek is tough, but at the same time, he gets put to sleep if you hit him hard enough, which is normal. They're both 42 years in age. I mean, I guess a question I have is, do you think there's any chance Verdum makes another title run? Is that even possible?
That's another thing. Obviously he does have a very decorated past, but he has had 2 years off without competing. Ring rust is a very real thing for some people, so very anxious to see how he handles that. And I believe I had read something where he said, he had two fights left with the UFC, and then he was very open to kind of exploring options after that. So who knows? Maybe he does get a couple nice wins and pursue a title with the UFC. But if not, he could definitely, beef up some heavyweight competition at ONE or Bellator. So curious to see.
I'd love to see him in ONE or Bellator. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
I think this was a great matchup for him coming back off of 2 years. If he went against a Derek Lewis or a Volkov, it would have been quite tougher.
I think Volkov was his last loss right
was
before
it?
he got. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think that sounds familiar. But I think he could have gotten a lot. I think this is the best matchup, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Would you agree with me?
Yeah, I would, just because Olenek, he's definitely, his signature thing is that choke, and he's caught so many people in it. That's why you said he has as many submission victories as he does. But when you're going against a grappler like Verdum, I just don't see him making the mistakes to get caught in that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'll give Verdum the win. Verdum, who knows? He beats everyone that he goes against, including C-Level Kane. No, I'm just memeing out here. Next fight. Wow. To finish off the prelims, You could probably talk about this one for 30 minutes. Donald Cowboy Cerrone and Anthony Pettis. Before I let you rant, I just want to. Anthony Pettis is, in my opinion, kind of in the later stages of his career, but he's still very dangerous. And I'm not saying Donald Cowboy Cerrone isn't. He thrives off of times where there's less pressure, and I think this is kind of less pressure in this. But I just have to say I think Anthony Pettis finishes the fight by TKO or KO. So I'll go ahead and let you go.
Yeah, man. Like I said earlier, they're both very, very decorated past. But it's just kind of, noticed lately, it's just kind of whoever shows up. They've both, Cowboys obviously always struggled with the big matchups. But just kind of in general, it's very evident. Sometimes he's there and sometimes he's not. I know he spoke on that in one of his more recent interviews with Brett, I believe. But yeah, I think that he's going to benefit from a situation like this where there's no crowd. I think he'll be able to just kind of ease his mind and just fight. Pettis is another one where he's put on some amazing performances. Obviously, what he did to Wonderboy, regardless of how that first round went, was amazing. I mean, who saw that coming? But then in turn, I don't want to say he performed. Obviously, Diaz kind of put a pressure on him and dictated that fight. Go ahead.
Yeah, not only did Diaz outskill him, but in his defense, USADA was doing a drug test for him pre-fight, I'm sure, as you know, and he cut his hand. I don't know how much of a factor that had in it, but obviously you don't want to be fighting with a cut hand 10 minutes before you fight. And also going against Tony Ferguson, everyone loses against Tony Ferguson. So I think some people are kind of, again, I'm not being disrespectful to Donald Cowboy Cerrone. He could head kick me into the third dimension, but I don't think Anthony Pettis and Donald Cowboy Cerrone are quite in the same stages of their career. I think Donald's gone against very high-level opponents, and he still is very good, but I think Anthony Pettis' losses are kind of more understandable than Donald's. I think, again, all the opponents Donald has gone against, I mean, everyone loses to them, but I think Anthony Pettis is going to be a little fresher. I think he's going to be a little sharper, and I think he's going to get the job done.
Is this at 170, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I said this when he fought Conor, and it obviously didn't prove well, but I really think more than Pettis, Cowboy will benefit at 170. I just think he naturally kind of has a bigger build. Obviously, as someone who's cut weight before, I love to see him going up. I don't know, why would you cut the weight? So good for them on that. But regardless, and there may be some bias in here, but I got to go with Cowboy. I just think in every aspect he can beat him. But like I said, it really is a toss-up. They've both had great performances, and they've both had performances that kind of leave you scratching your head. So I think whoever shows up is going to get it. And like I said, with no crowd there, I'm kind of leaning towards Cowboy.
I got to say, with the pressure off of Cowboy's back, I mean, you've seen the wins that he's gotten over Alexander Hernandez, who is a very skillful opponent. He's gotten a win over Al Iaquinta that I counted him out on, and I had to end up paying you for. He's very skilled, very good opponent. I just think that Anthony Pettis is going to get the job done. But, hey, I hope Cowboy wins. I hope he's able to get it done because I think that he has some very impressive wins in his past, and I hope he can keep that up.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting, kind of where both of them go depending on who wins and loses. I know, obviously, Sergio Anthony's brother is over in Bellator. I don't know. And, obviously, Cowboy, should he lose this, that's a 4-fight lose streak. So, I don't know. Definitely, I would say a must-win scenario for both. But regardless, nothing left to prove. They've both done it all. But should be fun for sure.
Do you remember who Pettis fought before Thompson?
I believe it was Tony. Before.
Oh, yeah. Wait, no. No, I don't think it was. I think it went Tony at 229. Then last April, it was Thompson.
Off the top of my head, I can't.
Let me Google it real quick. I believe he fought
He lost to
Thompson
Fahara after Diaz, and that was his most recent.
Wow, how did I forget that? Yeah, he lost. I mean, Fahar really showed up in that. Like he
Yeah.
looked really good. He's going to be a
hmm
very good contender. And I saw that Drew Dober and Fahar almost had a fight going. That is not a good fight for Drew Dober.
Yeah, he's a tough one. He's another one with some high level grappling that definitely worth keeping an eye on.
Okay, so yeah, he beat Michael Chiesa, and then he
hmm
lost to Tony Ferguson, and then he lost to Thompson last April,
Yep.
and then he lost to Nate Diaz, which Nate Diaz is a very skilled opponent. And in
Yeah.
that fight, you could just kind of tell he was overwhelmed.
I was gonna say it just looked like that pressure was too much, broke him.
Mm-hmm. And then yeah, lost to Fahara, which somehow I forgot about because 246. I was just so focused on the main event.
Yeah.
I have to be honest. And then now he's going against Donald Cowboy Cerrone. But Cerrone, I mean, despite the last 3 losses, he is.
I was gonna say before those last 3 losses,
He looked good.
He was on fire. I mean, he had fell on a tough streak. I think he had lost 3, but then he fired off, whooped up on Perry, whooped up on Hernandez. Then, like you said, Ali Quinta. I mean, he was looking like he was gunning for the belt, and then Cowboy being Cowboy, he just accepted every tough fight possible, and
Yeah. Back in 2016, he got that win over Rick Story. What a KO.
yeah,
Then he got a win over Matt Brown. Still one of my favorite head kick KOs. That was so beautiful. And then, he kind of had but everybody's lost against are very high level opponents. Robbie Lawler, Darren Till.
yeah. And that Robbie Lawler fight, that was a super close one, and
Do you remember
going
if
into
it was split decision or?
I don't recall it being split decision, but I definitely remember it was a very well contested fight.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was kind of when when he had bumped up to 170, and it looked like he had those 2 finishes. It looked like 170 was where he needed to be, and then it seemed like when he kind of got into the top tier 170 guys, they just were all a little too big and too powerful for him.
Yeah, and then terrible matchmaking, putting Donald Cowboy Cerrone against Darren Till at 170. I don't know who did that, but you're mean.
Yeah, that was another Cowboy being Cowboy. He had said, he had never seen Darren Till fight. He just said, sure, I'll fight him. And then obviously he's Cowboy made 55 and Darren Till's plenty big at 85. So just from the jump, that was a very, that was a tough matchup for him.
They look so different in sizes.
Mm-hmm.
Darren Till's huge. Right now, I follow his Instagram, which is the funniest Instagram out there, but he looks probably 225, if not more.
Yeah, he's big. I'm so glad he's at 85.
I wouldn't even be surprised if later on, if he keeps up how he's going, if he ends up at 205.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. He's got a back on him. For sure.
You want to talk about Kelvin Gastelum, someone who I think should go back down to 170 and try to figure out his diet. I mean, he's a very good opponent, but I think he would do a lot better at 170.
I agree. And he's, you can't, it's hard not to let height dictate someone's weight just because it's so easy. But I really do think that he could get down to 70, and contest, some of the better guys up there.
Yeah.
But, I mean, at the end of the day, if he doesn't want to cut weight, he doesn't want to cut weight. I mean,
yeah.
If he's more comfortable there, then...
Listen, he's still a very high-level opponent at 185, so if he can do it and look that good, I mean, I just want to make a little tidbit before we move on. I don't know what the scoring was in Darren Till versus Kelvin Gastelum. One judge had it, him winning. You guys can go back and rewatch that. Not at all.
No.
Darren Till won 29-28. No, very clearly. So I don't know what kind of scoring that was. But
yeah, I mean, Darren Till, he definitely took a very safe approach, but in turn, it wasn't. I mean, he just shut Kelvin down. So to give Kelvin all 3 rounds was bonkers. But I mean, regardless, those are the top guys at 185, and
yeah,
Kelvin could definitely still contend at 185, regardless of his size. Obviously, went the distance with Adesanya, so he's got some good fighting in him.
I don't see him breaking in the top 2 or 3. I think Costa, Adesanya, and Till, and I think even Robert Whitaker are very tough for him. I'd like to see him go against Jared Cannonier when he heals up. I think that'd be a good one.
Yeah, I mean, he's a big guy. He used to fight heavyweight.
That's the issue, you know? You
Mm-hmm.
have, I mean, I know height, like you said, always doesn't dictate it, but when you're going against huge guys and you're not basically built for I mean, it does play a factor.
It does.
But yeah, as we were talking about Donald Cowboy Cerrone, I mean, he had some really good wins, but he's just gone against some really tough guys. Leon Edwards, he lost
Yeah.
there, and Leon Edwards, as we know now, is super tough. And then losing to Tony Ferguson, Justin, and Connor, those are all the top contenders in
Mm-hmm.
155. Those are all the people that are going to be fighting for the belt. So, no shame there. I still don't think it was a great idea for him to fight those opponents. I think they could have given him a little bit easier fights, but that's in hindsight. You never know.
Yeah.
He could have gone out there and head kicked Tony and knocked him out. I mean, it could have happened, but that's all in hindsight. Moving on to the next fight.
Yeah.
I already know you're going to love this one. Sarcasm. Greg Hardy and DeCastro.
Oh man. Obviously I'm not a fan of Hardy. He's a very talented and athletic individual, and he's got a lot of potential at the end of the day. But I mean, I don't know. And I know I can't, probably need to settle down on all that, but for me that's something, I struggle cheering for him, and I'm always going to go against him. And that being said, Castro's got some legit power. I'm pretty sure he, one punch dropped Justin Tafa. He looked good there. And I think both these guys got the power to end it with one shot. Obviously, I'm praying that DeCastro knocks him out, but it is hard to say. And I know Hardy is he's definitely surrounding himself with the right individuals. He's got a super solid team at ATT, and I don't know. I could honestly see him doing some damage in the heavyweight division, but gosh, I hope not.
Yeah, I mean, with all bias aside, Greg Hardy is super tough. He's had kind of a weird entrance into the UFC. He's had a lot of criticism, justified.
Yeah.
He had, I believe, 2 big knockout wins in the Contender Series. He looked very good in the Contender Series. Then he came out, and he had some kind of weird ones. He had an illegal knee loss. I guess was a loss or no contest, I believe.
I'm pretty sure it was a DQ loss.
Yeah. And
But
then
that whole fight was abysmal. I mean, everyone saw after the first round.
oh yeah,
It just
Hardy
was terrible.
Hardy was not ready for it. And in his defense, I mean, he's a newcomer in the sport.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know how gassed you get until you're in there doing it with someone real. Sparring doesn't really do justice. And then he had one where he used an USADA-approved inhaler. That was kind of a funny one.
Yeah.
Where that turned into a no contest. And then, of course, most recently he lost to Volkov. But Volkov is at the top of the division.
Yeah.
Volkov's the one who pieced up Derek Lewis for 3 rounds and then lost last minute. So
Yeah.
I personally, bias aside, I think he looked good in that fight.
He's very good.
But it's so hard to bet with Greg Hardy because Castro looks so good. And when you have that momentum swing, it just sometimes keeps going. He's 6-0. He finishes fights. Justin Tafa is absolutely no slouch. He was undefeated before he fought DeCastro. And he just one-punched Tafa. And then Tafa came back and knocked out Juan Adams, who Greg Hardy knocked out. So it's kind of like, it's a tough one to call for sure. Greg Hardy's at a -210 favorite. I do not agree with that whatsoever. I actually wouldn't mind putting money on Castro right now at a +175. What do you think?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I probably would have to give it to Hardy. But gosh, I hope not.
But at 2-1?
2-1, that does seem a bit extreme, but it's also hard for me to give an answer here just because I have so much genuine dislike for Hardy.
Right. Yeah. Moving on, we got another fight that should definitely be 5 rounds. Jeremy Stevens, Calvin
Dude.
Kattar. How do you say it?
Kattar.
Kattar. Okay, I've heard people say Qatar, and
I mean, at least I think Kattar. I don't know.
what a fight! What a
Yeah.
fight!
Dude, Cater's boxing is so crisp. That 1-2 he hit Lamas with, that was insane. He and even in that Zabit fight, I mean, obviously going against Zabit, not much you can do, it seems. But that third round, he was on him, and he, like I said, his boxing is top notch. But Jerry Stevens is another one, dude. That kind of power at featherweight is rare. He can end it so quick, and he's another one. Just not to lump him in with Cowboy and Pettis, but he's come on some tough times. He's obviously fought the best of the best, and Aldo and Zabit and Yair. But regardless, he's like I said, you can never count him out just because he does have that power, and I don't know. Ultimately, I do think this could be another one where Cater might take it by decision, just because his boxing is so crisp and clean. I don't see either of them, really going to the ground on this one.
Yeah, just talking about Calvin Kattar, he's one of those guys that looks better and better each time he goes out there and performs, even against Zabit. Zabit, I think, is going to be a future contender, if not a future champion. He looks really good. We could probably debate about that for a couple minutes, but what do you think about that, Zabit's future?
Zabit, man, he's so special. The way he can put everything together. Obviously, those trips he does, his grappling's legit, his striking's legit. I mean, no one can hit him at all. And just kind of listening to like interviews from Mark Henry and Frankie Edgar, they all say that like most people haven't seen anything. This dude does so much crazy stuff. He's another one who, talk about being big for your division, whatever he is, 6'1", 6'2", or whatever. That just puts him at such an advantage, and he's utilized it perfectly. Obviously, number one concern, conditioning, very evident in his last few fights with, between Stevens and Kattar, both those third rounds, they were gunning for him. But for those first two rounds, it's tough to imagine anyone at featherweight can do much damage to him. But when you look at working your way into main events and title shots, 2 rounds isn't going to cut it. Obviously, that's something for him to work on. But I imagine that he's doing all the right things, and it's definitely someone to watch out for.
And his chin. His chin holds up great. So Calvin Kattar, like I was saying, is just one of those people who looks better and better each time he performs. But Jeremy Stevens, he's absolutely no slouch. Do you remember that knockout of Josh Emmett?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking Josh Emmett was the next big thing. Josh Emmett still is very high level, and he just brutally knocked him out.
Emmett was out for I want to say a year and a half after that or something crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was brutal.
That was bonkers.
And Josh Emmett's the one who comes back and knocks out Michael Johnson, if that puts into perspective. So, Jeremy Stevens, very high level. Of course, he lost to Jose Aldo, but most people do. The only people who don't lose to Jose Aldo are champions.
Yeah.
And then he took the loss to Zabit, and then he took the loss to Yair Rodriguez. That was a great fight.
That really was.
That was such a good fight. We needed to flip-flop. I believe that was the Dominic Cruz-Chris Weidman card.
That was the Dominic Reyes Chris Weidman card.
What did I say?
Dominic Cruz.
My apologies. That would be fun. No.
Yeah.
That'd be a close one. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Dominic Reyes versus Chris Weidman. They need to flip-flop that. They need to make that 3 rounds and make Jeremy Stevens and Yair Rodriguez 5 rounds, because what a fight. I want to see that again.
Yeah. And that was another one. I know training for that one, Jeremy Stevens had brought Tony Ferguson in for his cardio. So, everyone talks about Tony's pace and Tony's cardio. So, no wonder that third round he was, had Yair hurt the whole mat or that whole round. But Kattar's never really shown any, slowing down. So, that one's going to be a barn burner for sure.
Yeah, can't wait to see that one. I got to give it to Kattar. I think he's more technical, unless Stevens, of course, knocks him out, which is a very real possibility. But I think Kattar wins the decision. You agree?
Yeah, I think you got to give it to Kattar. Obviously, Stevens throws bombs, but Kattar's hands are so crisp, it's hard to imagine something's gonna catch him clean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I gotta agree. And then the next fight, which someone will leave on a stretcher, guaranteed. Francis Ngannou and Jairzinho Rozenstruik or Struik. Either way, wow, what a fight. There's a lot to talk about in this one. First, let's talk about kind of how Ngannou has bounced back from the loss of Stipe Miocic and Derek Lewis.
Yeah, obviously I mean, just looking at him, you could tell that dude could probably pick any sport in the world and be, you know, a top tier professional. But I think that was a big step for him to kind of jump over those mental hurdles. That's something a lot of fighters have dealt with. Obviously, not to harp on it too much, but even Cowboy, that's something he recently has talked a lot about. So, for Ngannou to kind of jump over those hurdles and compete at his talent, that's pretty terrifying. But since when has anybody called Ngannou out? And that's from right away. Rozenstruik said, "I want to fight that guy," which is have fun with that. But I mean, Rozenstruik's kickboxing's world class. So it's I don't know. It's interesting to see. And we've seen Rozenstruik go 5 rounds. Obviously, he knocked Alistair out, 24 minutes in. But Francis is one where you saw with that Stipe fight, he had about 4.5 minutes in him, and then it was pretty rough after that. So, should it go into those later rounds, should be interesting. But if it goes into those later rounds is a big question because those dudes are terrifying, and they throw heat.
Yeah, I mean, what a good fight. Ngannou coming off of that loss not coming off, but had that loss with Stipe Miocic and then had that terrible fight with Derek Lewis. But then he bounced back huge. Tell me if I'm missing anyone, he got a knockout win over Cain Velasquez. He got a knockout win over Curtis Blades. He got a knockout win over Junior Dos Santos. Mm-hmm. All either past champions or future contenders.
All within like a minute, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was there live for the Junior Dos Santos versus Francis Ngannou fight. Scary seeing it live. It is scary, like that a human being can be that strong and that quick. And you saw Junior Dos Santos made one little mistake and he overextended, and Francis Ngannou just put him out.
I was gonna say that. Obviously I wasn't there, but just watching that fight on TV, it just kind of, from the second they got knocked on, it just seemed like a matter of time before It just, I don't know, it just didn't seem fair. It just, kind of knowing that Ngannou had already gotten over those hurdles, it was really hard to imagine that Junior Dos Santos was going to be able to keep up with that pressure and, that power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was crazy. And how much of a bummer is it? I got front row tickets, I think like second row tickets to Francis Ngannou versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik in Columbus, Ohio, and it gets canceled. What a fight that would have been with the co-main event of Cody Garbrandt versus Rafael Assunção.
Yeah, that would have been. And Aspen Ladd was on that card too, I believe. That was a stacked card.
Matt Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an insane card. Mm-hmm. I'm so bummed. I can't wait for UFC to resume attendance so I can go to another fight. Honestly, the two fighters that I want to see the most anytime I go, I'm going to go to a Francis Ngannou fight or I'm going to go to a Justin Gaethje fight. I mean, those are the two ones. If
Gaethje's, I was fortunate enough I got to see him and Vic down in Lincoln.
What a quick one.
That was, dude, when he hit him, everybody was jumping up and down roaring. It was intense.
Mm-hmm. And then I had, without getting into the next card, I had tickets to Anthony Lionheart Smith against Glover Teixeira, which is going to be a great fight. I can't wait to watch that one. But Francis Ngannou just has unhumanly power. He touches you. You see it every single time he touches you, and you go to sleep. And no level of skill can stop that when you get touched. So the question is, can Rozenstruik avoid that punch and land his own? Rozenstruik is a very technical fighter. He was a kickboxing champion, I believe. I mean, he has, I believe, somewhere around 70 fights in kickboxing. He is very experienced, and I don't think this is the right matchup for him yet. Now that puts you in a place with who goes against Ngannou. I think Rozenstruik didn't win that fight against Alistair Overeem. I don't think it should have been stopped. He popped right back up, but I understand why his
Mm-hmm.
lip. But with 5 seconds left, it could have been one of those things where if it just played out, Alistair Overeem would have won.
Yeah, of course it's yeah. I
I,
mean it's
I I'm not saying it shouldn't have been stopped, but with how it went, I'm not so certain that Rosenstruck is going to get the win here. I think Francis Ngannou is going to be too quick, and no matter how much kickboxing experience Rosenstruck has, I think Ngannou is going to be more experienced in the MMA octagon, and I think he's going to be quick, and I think he's going to land something.
yeah, and one thing for sure to watch would be Rosenstruck's chin because he ate some bombs for over him and he just took them like I remember there was a few of them where just watching it on TV you're going oh and oohs and ahs and it just didn't phase him whatsoever. He just kept coming forward. Obviously, that was kind of a weird fight. Alistair, tried his best to keep it on the ground from majority of the fight, but I mean, Rosenstruck showed just one punch, and that's both these guys. That's what makes a matchup like this so much fun to watch because it literally takes one punch for someone to just be done.
Yeah. So do you think this is a good next step for Rosenstruck, or do you think he maybe should have, because I think he's going somewhere where he's facing Alistair Overeem, which is a very game opponent, but it's coming off of some knockout losses in the past, and he's jumping to Francis Ngannou. Like, that seems like a big leap to me. Not a huge leap. Of course, Alistair Overeem is a former K1 champion. He's great, but I think Francis Ngannou is he's at the top and could be a champion when he challenges next. I feel like that's a very big step experience-wise.
Yeah. The thing with Rosenstruck though is he's had two quick, like 30-second knockouts. I think he knocked Alan Crowder out. It was like the heavyweight record. I want to say it was like 8 seconds or something crazy. Then obviously he knocked out Arlovsky in like 30 seconds, and then like 2 weeks later it was fighting Alistair Overeem. So I mean he's clearly he's confident and he's ready, in his opinion, to step up and fight these top level guys. So I mean, especially at heavyweight, heavyweight's always kind of been a division that kind of has lacked depth. So I mean, why not? Why not jump straight into it? And like I said, all it takes is one punch. Obviously, easier said than done, but if you want to fight for the title, finishing Francis Ngannou is a pretty solid way to make a statement. Try and get that shot.
The only issue I find with it is Francis Ngannou was kind of fast-tracked for his title shot too, and you saw that he had that one-punch knockout, that scary power, and he went against a grappler in Stipe Miocic. Not only grappler, but someone who could stand up, but Stipe Miocic just dominated him for 5 rounds. So I'm kind of seeing a similar trend with... The thing that scares me is if he put Alistair Overeem asleep in the first or second round, I would have been like, okay, let's go. But the fact that Alistair Overeem was able to kind of, take him down, kind of dominate the fight the whole time, it makes me think that if he does get a win over Ngannou, which is very possible, and who's he going to go against next? Stipe Miocic,
Yeah.
Daniel Cormier. It's going to be a very tough fight. Not Daniel, but Stipe Miocic. I mean, I don't see him winning that fight. I think Stipe Miocic, I don't think he has the experience yet to be a world champion, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. And then even if you kind of look at, just kind of looking at the heavyweight division, if they weren't to give either of them a title shot, you match him up with someone like Curtis Blades, that's a tough matchup. Mm-hmm. Even Fabricio Verdum, if Alistair Overeem can get you to the ground and kind of dictate the whole fight there, good luck with Fabricio Verdum on the ground. That's a bad recipe right there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Interesting to see. Definitely, this is definitely a very fan-friendly matchup. Just because you don't got to worry about anybody trying to lay and pray and hold someone against the fence. They're gonna come out swinging. Where either of them goes from here, that could be interesting. But definitely a fun one to watch.
Yeah, I think, I've been saying this after the last fight too, but I think after this, you can't give Ngannou anyone else but a title shot. He's just dismantled everyone that he's gone against, and the only person that's kind of creeping up in the heavyweight division is Curtis Blades, and Francis Ngannou has put him asleep twice.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always been very high on Curtis Blades, but man, like you said, Francis,
Actually,
just kind of ragdolled him.
sorry to interrupt you. I don't know if he. My memory might be faulty, but I think Ngannou versus Curtis Blades 1 was not a knockout. I think it was like something to do with the doctor
It was
stoppage.
a doctor stoppage, but he was landing some shots
Oh,
on
he
him.
was? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, like, Curtis Blades is one of the top, but I don't know where Curtis Blades goes next either because he's one of the top opponents, but I don't think he gets past Ngannou if they fight 10 times.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to sell a trilogy or a third fight with them.
Yeah. So this is what I think. I think if Ngannou wins, then he gets a title shot. He waits for a title shot. I think if Rosenstruck wins, you put him against Curtis Blades.
You could do that. I believe, kind of before all this madness went down, I believe they were trying to do Blades and Volkov.
Yep, they were doing that for June, end of June.
Yeah, so I guess I don't know if that's something they're still trying to put together, but
And which I think is a very good fight. I think Blades wins that, but I
yeah,
don't
for
know.
sure. But I mean, Volkov, definitely with that height, could
Yeah.
definitely pose some challenges. Getting him to the ground.
Yeah, very good fights coming up. I want to talk about the co-main event:
Yeah,
Henry Cejudo, Dominic Cruz. What are your thoughts?
that's man, it's so hard to count either of them out. I genuinely think it's gonna be a razor thin fight. Um, I don't really see Cejudo trying to wrestle him too much, even though I think he could. But I don't know. I think just kind of with Cruz's movement, he's kind of got that patented Cruz footwork where he's bouncing around. I struggle to see Cejudo rather getting a hold of him to the point where he can hold him down. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, it's been 4 years since Cruz has fought, but man, you can never count him out. Just because he's so tricky. I mean, other than Cody Garbrandt, no one's ever been able to really do much to him. But Cejudo's another one. You can't. I mean, that dude is so driven. I remember I was hearing about how right after he won the Olympics, the youngest Olympic champion ever for the U.S., I guess. But as soon as he won the Olympics and he turned his focus to MMA, he moved into a boxing gym, like legitimately slept at the boxing gym because he was so determined at becoming a UFC world champ. So, just when you have determination like that and you're that driven, and I mean, it's so hard to count that out. And obviously, I guess I don't know how to pronounce it. That head coach, he's got Eric Albini or something like that. I mean, that dude knows what he's doing. They're both gonna have a very thought out game plan, and I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if it went either way. Both those dudes are tough, and they're gonna be ready for each other for sure.
Yep, we know what Dominic Cruz has done in the past. He's had a huge title reign. He's one of arguably the bantamweight goat. But Cejudo, wow, he has impressed me. Going against Marlon Moraes, I mean, I thought I love Cejudo. He gets a lot of hate for being the king of cringe. I love him. I think he is a great fighter. But wow, I had Marlon Moraes in that. Marlon Moraes is super dangerous, and Cejudo had a lot of issues early. He got hit with a lot of leg kicks. It looked like it was almost over for him.
I was gonna say that first round was tough.
Oh yeah, but then Cejudo is so good at switching his game plan. That's what makes him so scary. He's able to switch his game plan in the middle of the fight and stay composed. Against Demetrius Johnson, number 2, if you saw in the first round, his ankle rolled.
Yeah.
And that he could barely even step on it. He kept tripping, and he was able to stay composed and beat one of the greatest. So I think Cruz is going to give him some real issues, but I think Cejudo is going to be able to stay composed. I think he's going to be able to somehow figure out how. I think it's going to be close. I know you're going to disagree with me here, but I wouldn't be surprised if Cejudo got a TKO or a KO in some of the later rounds, because I think Cejudo has very powerful strength for the weight class. even for flyweight, but for bantamweight still. So I think he's going to get a TKO or KO, and if it does happen to go to decision, man, it's a toss-up.
Yeah, I agree. I think Cruz definitely has a chin. I mean, he took some bombs from Garbrandt, who, one of the harder hitters at 35. I guess another thing is that size difference. So Cejudo, obviously, it was pretty tough for him to get down to 125, but he definitely did it, and there's a reason he was a champ there. But when you line him up, there's probably about a 5-inch height difference there. I don't know, especially when you think about Cruz's movement. He's already hard to hit. I'm curious to see how that'll factor in. I imagine Cejudo's definitely already accounted for that, and they're going to be on top of it, but still, it's something to watch for sure.
Yeah, and by no means is it an easy fight for either of these fighters, but I got to give it to Cejudo. I think Cejudo's a winner, and I think Cejudo will find a way to get it done. But wow, is it going to be a tough one? I wouldn't be surprised if it was razor thin, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was a rematch after, if it comes down to a split decision, But talking about bantamweight, what a division.
Yeah.
What a division. Aljamain Sterling on that top. We got Corey Sandhagen.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to say Cody because sometimes I get those.
Yeah.
Corey Sandhagen, and then Peter Yan, which, wow, he looked good against Uriah Faber.
Yan is, in my personal opinion, I genuinely believe he's the best 135-pounder on the planet right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The way he puts things together, his power, his speed, just, coming forward in your face. I don't know. He just looks tough to me. Every single fight has just been dominant.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be interesting to see how his grappling lined up, just because he's never really been pushed in the grappling department, to my knowledge. But being from Russia, I imagine that's something well taken care of.
Yeah. I think it's going to be very interesting to see him. I think the fight they already made, but I think they're going to reschedule, is him against Marlon Moraes, which Marlon Moraes is a tough fight for anyone.
That's going to be awesome.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be a big breakout fight for him because, Uriah Faber is a very good fighter, but he's not quite where he was that he used to be. So I think that's going to be a very interesting fight. We got Aljamain Sterling against Corey Sandhagen. How do you think that one plays out?
That's an interesting one. Corey Sandhagen's another guy who he's got a very, very big build for the division. I got to see him in Lincoln, and to be completely honest with you, I had no idea who he was. He was fighting on the undercard, and he's, in that short period of time, he's skyrocketed. He's put together some great performances, but he's found a way to, utilize his length and his body in it. I don't know. He's got a lot of talent. I'm curious to see. Aljamain's another one. He's been out for quite a while. Good to see him coming back healthy. I guess I don't know. I guess, to be honest with you, I didn't know that fight was lined up. I hadn't thought much about that.
No, it's not lined up.
Oh.
It was scheduled, but now with everything going on, I don't know if it's going to go through or not. But I believe it was scheduled. If not, it was targeted. So I think that's the fight they're trying to make, and then that would make sense because it would kind of do a round robin there with Marlon Moraes, and then I would imagine probably an interim belt with the two winners. That wouldn't be a bad idea because Cejudo likes to take some time off between every fight, so that wouldn't be a terrible idea. It's interesting to see how Cejudo Cruz plays out, and it's interesting to see how the whole bantamweight division plays out in the next year. Personally, I think out of those four, Corey, Aljamain, Peter Yan, and Marlon Moraes, I think I got to agree with you. I think Peter Yan rises to the top. But, man, is it going to be some tough fights to get there?
Frankie Edgar's another one. I'm very curious to see him at 35 because he's always had a build where he's always belonged at 35, but, he was always doing his thing. Very successful at lightweight and featherweight, but definitely someone to watch in that 135 mix for sure.
What do you think Frankie Edgar can do at this point in his career in the division?
It's definitely it's a stacked division, but I'd love to see him go up against someone like I know him and Aljamain were in talks for a little bit.
I know him and Sandhagen were booked
Yeah.
for, I believe, January until
Hmm.
Frankie Edgar stepped in and fought one of the worst matchups that he
Yeah.
has ever taken, Chan Sung Jung, Korean Zombie, and I could talk about him for an hour.
Yeah. I've always been a big Frankie fan just because he's just Frankie. I'd love to see him come back and make a statement. I guess I don't know who they're gonna match him up with,
The whole
but
the,
there's plenty at
the
135.
whole bantamweight division is scary. There's no good matchups for anyone. Um, I didn't mind the Corey Sandhagen Frankie Edgar fight. I think that was a good one. Corey Sandhagen's super high level, but I mean, if Frankie Edgar wants to make another title run, he has to go against the high level opposition. How do you think that one would have played out?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I mean when you think about the whole idea of moving down to 135 would be to be the same size or bigger as a lot of your opponents. And first thing he does is sign up to fight the biggest 135 pounder there is. I mean, Sandhagen's like 6 foot. But obviously, when you watch a fight like the Yair Rodriguez fight with Frankie, he can manage taking down and holding someone down if they're that 5'11", 6 foot range. Um, and Sandhagen, he's obviously faced some quality competition. Um, but to go against someone with the wrestling pedigree of Frankie Edgar, that's a whole different ball game.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, a little bit of bias here, but I guess against anybody, I'd love to see Frankie go back to his old ways of just you know wrestling and ground and pounding.
Yeah. Um, do you need to take a nap or watch a movie before we get into this next fight? Because it might take a few. No. Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje. What a fight. Justin Gaethje coming off of some big wins over Donald Cowboy Cerrone, Edson Barboza, and James Vick. You were live to see that. That must have been nuts. Tony Ferguson, I mean, who beats him? Michael Johnson in a fight where he broke his arm.
Hmm.
Yeah, Tony Ferguson, super impressive. I believe 26-3, something in that realm. And I would guess that Justin Gaethje is somewhere around like 22-3 or 22-2. He's only lost 2 fights.
Hmm.
Super, super interesting matchup. Justin Gaethje, an absolute brawler, someone who's going to push the pressure, someone who's going to go for your head, somebody who's going to try to put you asleep, and he's been successful in his last 3 fights. But Tony Ferguson, someone who doesn't also doesn't stop putting on the pressure, someone that will literally break you. We saw it with Donald Cowboy Cerrone. We saw it with Anthony Pettis. We saw it, literally breaking them. I mean, what are your thoughts on this fight?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different variables that you could throw in, but man, Tony is another one who it's all mental with him. He does the things that he knows no one else is doing, and he thrives off of, I don't want to say negativity, but he thrives off of everything really. He'll go blow for blow with you, and with someone like Gaethje, both of them are just gonna be each other's face the entire time. Like I said, it's those first round or two. When you think about Gaethje's new approach, at least with his last few fights, it only takes one shot, and he's got some crazy power. The other thing I was thinking is Justin's leg kicks. Those have always kind of been one of his signature things. He's finished many fights just leg kicking people to the point where they can't even stand up anymore. And then when you think about kind of, I know this is a while back, and I imagine Tony's pretty well recovered now, but he had some pretty serious leg injuries. So I don't know. That's definitely something to watch if Justin's gonna attack those legs heavy. That's something he's always done, but especially in a fight like this where he knows Tony might be vulnerable there. And it's just, oh man, it's just that can change the pace of a fight if you can't, you got to think about leg kicks the whole time. But of course, like I said, Tony thrives off of negativity, and I don't know, man, that's such an awesome fight. It really, like, that's how people who have never seen MMA before, and if they're bored on the couch and they turn on ESPN, you don't understand how lucky you are to have that as a fight for, maybe it's your first card, because this is the fight that people dream of. These dudes are crazy.
Yeah. And this is the type of fight that make you toss and turn at night. Who's gonna
Yeah.
win? I found myself on both sides, keep going back and forth, and I couldn't even tell you what side I'm on right now. I think of Tony Ferguson as someone who is super tough, super durable, can finish you anywhere. He's finished many fights on the feet, many fights on the ground, many fights by doctor stoppage just because he hits you with elbows until you're cut up and bloody. But then I think about Tony Ferguson's downflaws, if you want to call it. He gets hit a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
he gets taken down a lot, which could be a benefit for him to get taken down, but surely not a benefit to get hit a lot against an opponent like Justin Gaethje. And tell me if I'm wrong, but he's never gone against an opponent that hits like Gaethje. I mean, nobody.
Yeah, it's fun. I legitimately had a dream last night where Justin Gaethje actually knocked Tony out with the right hand. I so vividly remember it. I don't know it now that when you mentioned it, when you said toss and turn at night, that's what reminded me. But I legitimately had a dream last night, and like you said, Tony's definitely he's prone to getting hit, and when you look at Justin's last few fights, like it's oh man, it's bonkers how hard he hits. I mean, you've seen Cowboy was another fight kind of like the Ngannou and Dos Santos one, where you just kind of, I don't know. For me personally, I just kind of felt like it was a matter of time before he landed something and it was lights out. And it's you can't go into a fight with Tony like that just because he's been rocked how many times, and I want to say it almost like it just powers him up. He's just weird and built like that. He thrives off of being in that environment. That's why it's so fun.
It's so crazy. One thing I want to point out, you're a hardcore MMA fan when you have MMA dreams. I've had so many mixed martial arts dreams, and it almost makes me think, oh, should I bet on this person since they won in my dream? It's weird. We're hardcore MMA fans when that happens. But Justin Gaethje, someone who has knocked out the last 3 opponents, but in Tony's defense, they haven't been the opponents that Ferguson has gone against.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they've kind of gone against similar opponents. They've gone against Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Tony Ferguson beat Kevin Lee, which is Kevin Lee. He beat Anthony Pettis. So, actually, they kind of have similar opponents. I'd give Ferguson the advantage in his experience because he has been in the UFC longer and he's on an incredible run right now. I just, again, I toss and turn with this fight. To me, I guess the question to me is, how unconventional Tony Ferguson is.
Yeah.
It's easy to hit him, but it's hard to keep hitting him. He'll do anything. I've seen him Granby roll.
Yeah.
I've seen him do a cartwheel. I've seen him do everything. He hits you with those elbows when you're coming in. I mean, this fight could literally go any way. Tony Ferguson could hit him with an elbow and cut his eye, and it could be stopped there. Tony Ferguson.
Don't say that.
Well, hey, I'm sorry. No, it could go any way. I guess the question is, can Justin Gaethje put his lights out? Because I think Tony Ferguson wins a decision.
Decision, yeah, that would, like I said, I really think after those first 2 rounds, I definitely see the advantage going into Tony's favor, just because the man doesn't get tired. He's just at you the whole time. I off the top of my head when he fought Edson Barboza, that's what sticks out to my mind. He was taking shots, but he just kept coming. He just kept coming, and then the second Barboza slipped up in the slightest, it was cinched that up, and it was over. But man, it's
a tough one.
That's such a tough one. And another thing is I've heard so many people say how tragic would it be if Justin knocks out Tony and then we don't get to see Tony Khabib, and couldn't disagree more. Why wouldn't you want to see the best against the best? Should Justin finish Tony or beat him by decision, however it's done, who wouldn't want to see him and Khabib?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think regardless, it's, this is a match made in heaven. And I don't know. I just hope that everything goes as planned. Everyone makes weight. Everyone's healthy. Gosh, that's exciting.
Yeah. And I talked about how Ferguson would probably be favored in a decision, but I don't see this going to a decision. I
No.
think if Justin Gaethje, I'm not calling Justin Gaethje one-dimensional. He's a great fighter, but I think if he can't knock him out within a couple rounds, Tony Ferguson is so slick, and you've seen Justin Gaethje exhausted in the
Yeah.
fourth round, even the third round with Eddie Alvarez, but the fourth round with Dustin Poirier, and I see Tony Ferguson cinching up a submission when Justin Gaethje's just dead tired, and I think that's just kind of how that goes. So, how the fight plays out, it could go any way. I don't know if Justin Gaethje can put him to sleep, but man, I don't know if he will, but I know he can. And
100%.
gosh, I want to give a prediction for the listeners. Go ahead. I'll think about it a little more.
Shoot, yeah, this is such a tough one to call. I don't know how anyone could count Tony out of any fight. I mean, if you're on a 12-fight win streak and arguably the toughest division in the UFC, it's pretty much impossible to go against you. But at the end of the day, he is susceptible to getting hit. And, with Gaethje's approach, picking his shots, maybe this is biased just because I've always been a big Gaethje fan. Getting to see him in person, kind of always, he's always been fun to watch, and he's always been one of my favorites. So I'll say second round TKO for Gaethje. But, gosh, like I said, it's so hard to count out Tony Ferguson of all people.
Yeah, I got to give it to Ferguson, a late round submission. But ask me tomorrow. I guarantee I'll say something else. It's one of those fights I cannot wait. We're recording this on a Thursday. I cannot wait for Saturday. It's going to be absolutely bonkers.
I know. It's so crazy. Like, it's crazy to think they actually weigh in tomorrow like it's actually happening.
Yeah, I don't believe it.
I know.
It's almost one of those things where if they came out and said this was a joke, I'd be like, oh, okay, makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. The whole thing, all the madness going on, it's so hard to imagine, but man, am I excited.
Dude, I am absolutely thrilled. I got to ask, you're a wrestler. You've weighed in, I'm sure, probably most of your life. I mean, weighing in's a thing. Does Ferguson weighing in at 155 three weeks ago have any play on this fight?
Physically, yes, it does, but I think the biggest advantage is going to be for him mentally. That's kind of, relating Tony Ferguson back to Cejudo is they're both just so driven, When you hear about, at least, just kind of from what I've heard from people like Eddie Bravo who are around Tony Ferguson, is he just doesn't stop. Every single thing he does until he physically cannot do anymore. They said he'll work out for 6-7 hours straight, just nonstop. And, mentally that's, as someone like Justin, to have to see that's tough to see. And then if you're Tony, you're a point up in your mind. You already went to an extent that he didn't go. So when you think about going into those late rounds, you already know, hey, I know I can push myself further than him. I already have. I'm already one step ahead. But with someone like Gaethje, he's so open about his mind going in, where he knows, he always says, all I can do is control my effort. He says, as long as I give max effort, I'll never be disappointed. And, I think that's a perfect combination, because they're both going to show up. Tony in his mind knows that he's done every single thing he can do to win this fight. And with Justin, he knows he's going to give it 110%. And I don't know. Gosh, that's this bonkers fight.
What a fight. So we just ran through the whole UFC 249 card. Creighton Bauman, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, but I want to go over a few more things before I let you loose. Is that all right?
Yeah, of course.
All right, so first thing I want to go over is Luke Rockhold. Can he make a return? What weight class, and how does he do it?
Luke Rockhold's one, he would really benefit from, whether it be a 195 or a 200, just because obviously he was so dominant at 185, and he's got the credentials at 185. But man, that's a tough cut for him, and as you get older in age, that's not easy on your body. But then when you saw him going up to 205 and going against a guy like Jan, who's plenty big at 205, you could see not saying his strength wasn't there. It's just a whole different body type, and he wasn't able to really control or manhandle Jan the way he was some of the people he fought at 185. So man, that's an interesting one. I know him and Anthony Smith have gone back and forth quite a bit. So that would definitely be a fun one to watch. But another thing for Luke is, mentally he has got to, I don't know what the word is, but he's got to reset himself. He's not champion of the world anymore. He's not the top of the food chain. Obviously his talent's there and his skills there, but he's got to mentally approach every fight like he doesn't have food in his kitchen at home. You kind of saw with the Bisping and even with the Jan, he almost had disdain for them. He just felt like he was that much better than them to the point where he didn't have to, he felt like he could make an error, and then in both fights he obviously got caught. So I think the biggest thing for him, he's got to find the right weight class. I'd like to see him at 205 just because I do think he has a body type for it. But, mentally too, he's got to reset, whether it be, if he's got to move camp or just, he's got to do something to, get himself back in that mindset. It was kind of evident through Conor in his last fight. He kind of came at it with a different approach, and you could just kind of see that he, I don't know, he came out hungry. And I'm not saying that Luke hasn't came out hungry. He's just kind of came out almost thinking that he was better than his opponents already. And I think talent-wise, he's definitely there. But, that's not how the fight game works. The better man who competes and puts their best foot forward is going to get their hand raised. So for him, that's something to, just keep in mind.
Yeah, what a great analysis by you, Creighton. Luke Rockhold is a very arrogant fighter, as you know. He was saying it the nice way. He's very arrogant, and I remember when he was going against Jan Blachowicz, he was saying already that he's not on my level, stuff like this.
Yeah.
Jan Blachowicz put his lights out real quick. I mean, that'll happen if you underestimate anyone or if you come out there thinking you're better, like you said. So I think Luke Rockhold, as you said, I'm just going to copy you because you had such a great analysis. He just needs to reset, but I don't think that's possible for him. I think that's just who he is. I think he's going to go out there and he could lose 10 fights in a row. And I think he'd go out there and say, I'm going to knock you out in 10 seconds, That's just, I think he's just going to have that confidence. And for some people, that confidence works. And for some people, that confidence makes you not pay attention to the task at hand. And I think that's one of those things. I don't think he should come back, but if he does, I think he should come back at 205. And I think he should spend a lot more time on his ground game and just focusing on that, because striking against these 205ers, it's not going to be good. These 205ers, I mean, Luke Rockhold's big, but these 205ers pack a lot of power. Last thing I want to touch on, Anthony Rumble Johnson. I think he wants to make a return to the heavyweight division. What do you think is a good fight for him to come back?
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of talk of him at heavyweight, but I don't know. If I'm personally, I think I could see him at 205 or heavyweight. He's obviously going to have one-punch knockout power at both. I know he did after he, briefly retired. He definitely ballooned up. But I also think a lot of it was, useless muscle. So I think should he want to go back to 205, that's definitely doable for him, and there's a lot of fun matchups for him there. But regardless, people are gonna want to see Rumble fight. There's a reason. Yeah, he had such a big following because he had just a rare power. But at heavyweight, all those fights are fun, and he's on paper he's gonna have a speed advantage over a lot of those guys. I guess depending on how he's carrying the weight. But I mean, anyone in that top 10, top 5, sign me up. But that's another one, don't come back to come back. Obviously he knows his own head and he knows what's right for him, so I don't want to speak on that. But I would love to see him come back, but if he doesn't, he doesn't. But yeah, I mean, like I said, he's got power at both weight classes. He can knock anyone out like that. That idea of him and John Jones is always going to be fun. regardless. But obviously I wouldn't want to see him jump straight into that. But
Yeah.
anyone in the top 10 at light heavyweight or heavyweight is going to be fun for sure.
I think if he does decide to move to 205, I think John Jones is a much more winnable fight for him than it was when it was initially scheduled. Would you agree?
Yeah, that whole light heavyweight division, it's interesting, and I think it's surprising a lot of people just how talented a lot of these new guys are when you look at names like Reyes and Blachowicz. Blachowicz isn't relatively new, but regardless, people are kind of seeing how special he is. But man, yeah, at 205 Rumble, curious to see. I don't want to say either he has it or he doesn't, but when a fighter steps away and then steps back in, there's obviously cases like GSP where you can see that he didn't take a day off training, he didn't retire by any means, he was going after it every day, and that hunger was still there, and that's obviously why he won. But then there's also cases where people took time off as they retired, and they kind of let the competition catch up, and then maybe jumping in wasn't always the right decision. So obviously Rumble knows himself best, and he knows what he needs to do. So I'm plenty confident that he'll make the right decision. But yeah, for sure, had he been training that whole time, doing the right things, and yeah, I 100% imagine that he poses a threat to anybody, whether it's John Jones or at heavyweight, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that whole light heavyweight division went from kind of a dominant champion, and it kind of got flipped on its side with the last Santos in the Reyes fight. It's anyone's ball game kind of right now. So thank you so much, Creighton, for coming on the podcast. I can't wait to do it again. I'll have you on anytime.
Yeah.
And thank you for all the viewers for listening. Excited for 249. It's going to be an absolute insane fight. I encourage you guys greatly to watch it. And anything to say?
No, thanks for listening. Enjoy the weekend. God bless everyone.
Yeah, God bless. Take care.